Here's the final video on inputs and outputs, and it looks at the other type of transport here, active transport. So before we talk about active transport, let's just compare it with passive. So we've talked about diffusion and osmosis. Diffusion is the movement of substances from an area of high concentration through the membrane to an area of low concentration down a concentration gradient. Diffusion happens in small or uncharged particles that can pass through the plasma membrane. There's also a form of diffusion called facilitated diffusion that requires a protein in that membrane, but again the movement of passive movement of particles from areas of high concentration through to areas of low concentration. It's called passive because it doesn't require any energy or ATP. We compare this with active transport. So here we've got particles of high concentration and low concentration, and normally we'd expect the movement of particles to be from right to left here. But we are moving particles against the concentration gradient. So this is not the normal way for this to happen. And so in order to get particles to move up a concentration gradient, we have to use energy in the form of ATP. So these proteins are not channels, they're usually called pumps. So when you're using energy to move particles from an area of low concentration to high concentration, that's called active transport, usually through a pump. That's for small particles. For larger particles, we have to use endo and exocytosis. So exocytosis is for the bulk transport of particles outside a cell. So by bulk, we're saying there's a vesicle full of very large proteins, possibly like, large particles like proteins or sugars, and we can have these in a vesicle that will fuse with the plasma membrane and go out to the extracellular fluid. So large amounts of material or things that are too big to pass through even a channel or a pump can be moved out of the cell. Endocytosis, very similar process but going into the cell. So large particles of food, macromolecules or bigger can be engulfed by cells. Sometimes even bacteria or viruses can bind to the plasma membrane, and then a vesicle will form around that and be taken into the cell, possibly then fusing with a lysosome where that is digested. So endo and exocytosis, as you can imagine, moving all of these parts around requires ATP as well. So that's why they are an active form of transport. So active transport refers to pumps, which pump small particles against the concentration gradient. It also refers to bulk transport, exo and endocytosis, bringing large particles out of or into the cell.